جاج اشلی تبادر رو معرفی میکنم. واقعا بهتون افتخار میکنیم و ممنون که دعوت ما رو قبول کردین. میدونم خیلی وقتتون کمه. ممنون از خانم آناهیتا فراست که دوست شما هستن و این کانکشن رو برقرار کردن بین ما. و امشب شما به طور جنرال احتمالاً و بعد حالا میشنویم ازتون راجع به امیگریشن که یکی از پالیسی های مهمه الان بین دو حزب امریکا که بر پرزیدنسی دارن میرن هستش. احتمالاً خیلی از سوالا اونجا خواهد بود یا شاید تاپیک. و خانوم تبادر appointed هستن به United States Citizenship and Immigration Service Council on January 25 January 2021 by President Biden. Prior to her appointment as chief counsel, Khanum Tabaddor served as an immigration judge. She was appointed to the bench on November 2005. She's so young for all these times. Prior to her appointment, she served as an assistant U.S. attorney for Central District of California in Los Angeles. She also served as a trial attorney with the Justice Department Civil Division in Washington, D.C., and as a law clerk and attorney advisor for the Immigration Court and the Chief Immigration Judge. From 2017 until her appointment as a chief counsel, she served as a president of the National Association of the Immigration Judges. Khanum Tabaddor is recipient of a judicial of excellent awards by Mexican American Bar Association 2019, Armenian American Bar Association 2014, Arab American Lawyers Association of Southern California 2014, Iranian American Bar Association 2013. She's actively involved with the legal and the non-legal community, mentoring and speaking regularly before bar associations, conferences, symposium organization, and schools. Her education is, she received her bachelor degree, cum laude, from UCLA and her law degree from UC Hastings College of Law in, I believe is in San Francisco. In addition to her duties as a judge, she was an adjunct professor with several law schools, including George Washington Law School and UCLA School of Law. And there's more to her resume, but I kind of summarized it. I hope that's acceptable. And thank you very much again, Khanum. And the floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Khanum Dr. Madani. Thank you so much for the invitation.
Okay.
It's so nice to be joined by dear friends from my childhood with Dr. Malik, and of course, close friends Anahita and the Farasat family for introducing me to this beautiful organization. I really enjoyed hearing the conversations amongst good friends and people that I can see you have such a great tie, and you're a source of pride for us and a role model for us. So I'm really, really honored to have been invited. I'm sorry I'm not going to be able to speak in Farsi. I understood everything, but I'm not very well versed in speaking, particularly in legalese in Farsi. But I hope that I'll try to accommodate questions as best as possible. I have a short presentation that I have put together to talk you through some of the high points about DHS, about USCIS, about immigration policy in general, and my role within it. But I also welcome your questions. In talking with Anahita, we thought it would be helpful if you, during the presentation, if you have any questions, go ahead and put it in the chat. She's going to monitor the chat, and if she has the answers for you, she'll go ahead and answer it. Otherwise, she may jump in, or we may hold it for the end of the interaction and go ahead and address it then. But essentially what I thought I could do is present you with some basic framework about Department of Homeland Security, about the agency USCIS within the Department of Homeland Security, its operations, the breadth of work it does, talk about how some of the immigration policies are formulated and the guiding principles under which we work. And then if there's still any interest, I can tell you specifically what do I do within USCIS as the head of the legal program supporting the agency's mission and the department's mission. So I know it's a very complicated area, so there is no question that's, quote unquote stupid. Everything is, if you have the question, I guarantee you that others are thinking about it as well. So please feel free to jump in with any questions. So I thought what would be very helpful is maybe start a little bit at the beginning as to what gave birth to Department of Homeland Security. All of you should be well aware of what happened in 9/11. And in response to the 9/11 terrorism attacks, there was a nationwide reflection on looking at the causes of 9/11. And one of the primary causes was determined to be sort of the lack of adequate coordination amongst the various intelligence and law enforcement agencies. So with that, in May of 2003, the Department of Homeland Security was born. And within the Department of Homeland Security, there are 7 agencies that were brought together under one umbrella in the concept and the idea of putting together the collective resources and intelligence and information of these 7 agencies to help protect and defend the security of the nation, of the homeland. Those 7 agencies include TSA, so your experience at the airport is connected to DHS, that's Transportation Safety Administration, the Secret Service. You may have heard about the Secret Service that's responsible for protecting our president and our officials and former president. So Secret Service is part of that. FEMA, which relates to the Federal Emergency Management Administration, dealing with catastrophic situations, natural-made catastrophic situations or other emergencies that the federal government needs to respond to. The Coast Guard, which is also part of the law enforcement arm of the federal government. And then there are the 3 immigration agencies. The 3 immigration agencies were born out of the former Immigration and Naturalization Service. A lot of us went through the INS services. We know it as INS and maybe the federal building in downtown. But there was a concept, the idea was to break up the INS into 3 respective parts. So the immigration parts are now 3 separate agencies. One is CBP, which is Customs and Border Protection. And CBP deals with immigration, sort of the movement of non-citizens outside of the United States all the way up to the border. And CBP also deals with cargo. So cargo and people outside of the United States up to the border is within the Customs and Border Protection. Then we have ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement. So that has to do with the enforcement arm of immigration within the United States. So we have the enforcement arm outside of the United States, and then we have the enforcement arm within the United States. And then the third prong of that is USCIS, is the agency that I'm with. And that is U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services. And the focus of U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services is based on the benefits. So all the immigration laws that are being administered when people are seeking benefits under our immigration laws is administered through USCIS. So the concept was separate out the benefit arm from the more traditional law enforcement arm, but still keep it within the DHS framework. I think it is helpful to pause a little bit and think about what is the USCIS mission. We talked a little bit about DHS. DHS's mission is the overarching mission is obviously the security of the homeland conducted and done with the idea of maintaining the integrity and the values of the American people. USCIS mission is within that broader framework, but the focus, and I'm going to read it to you, and I invite you to think about it because that is really our guiding principles at USCIS. USCIS upholds America's promise as a nation of welcome and possibility with fairness, integrity, and respect for all. And I mean, I hold that mission dear, and it's one that I speak with my attorneys and support staff on a regular basis to remind them that that's the guiding principle that informs our decisions at USCIS and really helps us connect our mission with my legal program in support of the agency. But what does that really mean? What does it mean with this mission? What does it mean to be administering the benefit? Well, I'll talk a little bit about the structure of USCIS. We have 22,000 employees across the United States and overseas, and over 100 offices within the United States and overseas. I know we talked a little bit about administering the immigration laws. So we have people in the United States. We deal with all of the people who are in the United States, but we also administer immigration law in conjunction with State Department overseas. So we have 22,000 employees, 100 offices in the United States, and a dozen offices overseas, including Doha, Istanbul, and right now several of them in the Western Hemisphere. We deal with dozens of different types of immigration-related applications. Some of you may be familiar with the traditional one that everybody talks about is green cards. Green cards are layperson's term that relates to lawful permanent residence. It's basically the permission to live in the United States as a permanent resident. But that is only one form of application that we deal with. And even that one has employment-based, it can be family-based, it could be, diversity visa, it could be based on asylum. So there's a lot of different categories, or what I usually call buckets, of cases that can go even in the green card mode. But we deal with extensions of non-immigrant visas. So if people are here on visitor visas, or if they're here on some sort of temporary work visas, we deal with those extensions. We deal with employment authorization requests that are associated with those visas. We deal with asylum applications. We deal with refugee processing overseas. We also do naturalization, which is really the sort of the crown for us, because it is something that we hold so near and dear. And I know many of you have gone through the naturalization process and are familiar with the process of becoming a United States citizen. And that's sort of the golden goal for everyone that we're trying to help. A little bit more about the statistics. What does this mean then in terms of the number of applications? Last year, our agency alone completed 10 million applications. So I just share that to put it into context, because a lot of times when people reach out to us and they want to ask about a single question or a single what we call benefit line, and they are frustrated about the backlog, they're frustrated about the time it takes, or they're frustrated about the ability to engage with us. We are very well aware of that, and we're trying very hard to deal with that. But I think sometimes people don't appreciate the sheer volume of applications and interactions that we have. So that 10 million applications that were processed last year means on an average day, we have over 40,000 applications that are completed. We have over 1,000 requests for humanitarian protections like asylum or refugee. We have over 12,000 people a day that are being sent for biometrics, but because the applications requires your fingerprints, so we send people to what are called biometrics appointments. So we process 12,000 of those a day. We verify employment authorization for over 100,000 new hires. So part of the law, in addition to the requirement for having employment authorization, employers, companies that hire people need to verify that people have employment authorization. And we provide that verification up to 100,000 people a day. We receive 60,000 phone calls to our agency. We process 150,000 inquiries through our online accounts and through the digital self-help tools. And over 1.5 million people have touch upon our website on a daily basis. So that's just to give you a little bit of the sheer structure, the number of people, and the sheer volume of work that we are doing on a regular basis. Then I want to give you a little bit about the role of USCIS and the policy making, because I know a lot of people are curious about, so what does that mean? How is policy developed? Well, DHS has a primary role in conjunction with, obviously, the White House and the president in formulating our nation's immigration policies through the executive branch. And DHS, as I mentioned, has 3 separate immigration agencies. So as one of those independent agencies, we do play a big role in formulating those immigration policies. And on a daily basis, I'm working with our policy chiefs and our leadership at various levels in discussing and finalizing policy. Immigration law, as you know, is one of the most complicated areas of the law. It's probably even more complicated than the IRS code, although I'm sure if I talk to my tax friends, they would claim that that's more complicated, but I think it's a pretty close race. And because it's such a complicated area of the law, it's hard for people to navigate it. And there are a lot of places within that structure where people have questions, and there may be opportunities for policy decisions. So USCIS plays a role in formulating and sharing with the public some of those policies. And when you go on our website, there is a section dedicated to what's called the policy manual. And the idea was to, again, make it as transparent, as interactive, as helpful to the public as possible. And so people will know about the very specific policy decisions that the agency has made regarding every type of application or the various ways that you navigate the system. So I definitely encourage you to go on our website to check that out. But I think a lot of people also say, well, you know, you're a political appointee, or what does that mean about the White House's role? And I think it's important to note that when I first was appointed in January of 2021, one of the mandates was reflected in the Biden-Harris platform on immigration through various executive orders. So the president came out and laid out some framework within which he wanted the agencies responsible for immigration to approach the policy realm. And one of those was really about recognizing that we don't have hostility towards the non-citizen community, that we're looking to welcome and provide people opportunities and a promise of a welcoming United States with integrity and honesty. And so one of those executive orders was a mandate to remove unnecessary barriers that people have to face navigating this very, very sophisticated immigration law realm. And there was also focus about commitment to our humanitarian portfolio, you know, about the asylum and refugee processing, and as well as specific commitments to sort of some of the immigration provisions, like particular social group or things that are a little bit more in the weeds. So from day one, there was a steer from the White House, from the president, about where the focus should be. But through that, obviously, things evolve. And as you know, there's been a lot of conversation and focus about the border. So I'm going to highlight some of the recent policy decisions that have been emanating from the White House that we have been working together in implementing and engaging with the community on. So for those of you who are keeping up, I'm just going to repeat for others. On June 4th, President Biden announced it's called the Securing the Border Presidential Proclamation, which was in response to the number of people who were what we call irregular sort of migration to the border. You've been hearing about people coming into the southern border in order to avail themselves of the opportunity to seek protection under asylum. And because the numbers have been pretty overwhelming at the border, the presidential proclamation recognized that we will need to have some ability to manage the numbers, and within certain numbers, we would suspend the ability to seek asylum and would change some of the what we call the screening standards. So while the numbers are above a certain daily encounters, which is over 2,500 people, then individuals who come to the border without a lawful visa, without permission, will be essentially only screened for a heightened protection claim and basically not permitted to enter the United States. But that's all because it is sort of what we call a carrot and stick approach, which is a recognition that we want to make sure that people avail themselves of lawful pathways. And if we're going to ask people to avail themselves of lawful pathways, we need to make sure that people have lawful pathways, that they're aware of lawful pathways, and that we're not throwing unnecessary barriers in their way. So in conjunction with that, there has been a number of humanitarian policy programs that have been introduced over the last couple of years, trying to deal with an assessment of the populations that are coming to the border and people who are trying to sort of use the irregular migration paths. I don't know if you've heard about this, but we have what are called CHNV, which is a family reunification or a parole program for people from Cuba, Haiti, Nicaragua, and Venezuela. Those are the 4 countries that were producing the largest number of people who were dealing with a lot of humanitarian issues in their country and coming to the United States. So we introduced the CHNV program, which allowed people to essentially sponsor, so to allow a coupling of people from those countries at a specific pace a month to be able to come through the legal pathways of that program. We also have established what are called safe mobility offices. So again, recognizing that we're getting a large number of people coming through the Western Hemisphere, and the idea is to avoid having them go through these very, very horrendous smuggling rings where they're subjected to extortion, to violence, to kidnapping, to rape. A lot of times people don't fully appreciate the risks, the dangers that they're taking on to come through these pathways. So we have also created these safe mobility offices. So in Colombia, in Costa Rica, in Ecuador, and in Guatemala, we have offices. As you remember, I mentioned we have offices overseas. We have offices where people can have their applications for refugee, which is protection-based, their a claim of refugee, be processed, which means that they don't have to go through these treks across the Western Hemisphere. It will be in these safe zones where they can be, where their applications can be considered. And so far, we have been able to, through our CHNV program, have been able to regularize over 480,000 people. We have conducted over 114,000 refugee applications so far just this fiscal year. And we have been able to resettle over 66,000 refugees in the United States. And we're on track to hopefully bring on another 30,000 refugees. So again, in hopes and to be able to message to people that there are ways to avail yourselves to protection, but you need to follow the rules and come in through those processes. Another program and policy that has been announced over the last several years has been the utilization of what's called temporary protected status, TPS for short. And that is a protection that's available under the law when the secretary, in consultation with State Department, determines that the country conditions in those countries are very, very dire. And so for the people who are already in the United States, you can provide what's called temporary protected status. And so there are 16 countries currently that enjoy that benefit, which means that if those individuals are in the United States from those countries, if they haven't engaged in criminal activities or other similar, they're not national security issues, everybody goes through background checks, they can request temporary protected status, which is a temporary permission to stay in the United States with an employment authorization so that they can support themselves. Some of those countries that have been designated for TPS include Afghanistan, Burma, Cameroon, Ethiopia, Haiti, Syria, and Venezuela. I'm sure if you've done a little bit of research into the country conditions in those countries, you'll be able to sort of readily recognize why some of those countries have been recognized for this TPS. The other application or process that we have recently announced, and that's sort of the hot off the press process that we have shared, is the president announced on June 17th a new process for allowing spouses of United States citizens to be able to request a parole or a permission for parole in place, so that they can then utilize the pathway to a lawful permanent residence, to that green card. And essentially, in a nutshell, a lot of people believe that once you marry a United States citizen, that you automatically get a green card. And it isn't like that. It isn't easy at all. Being married to a United States citizen is only the first step to wanting to go through this arduous path of becoming a lawful permanent resident. And for many, many people, they have who may have entered the United States through these irregular migrations, which is entry without having had prior visas. They are stuck. They've been married, they have children, they've been living here on average more than 20 years, but because of that extra barrier, they were not able to go through the green card process. So through this process for sort of keeping families together, the president announced, and we're working towards coming up with the implementation guidelines, is that, you know, individuals who have a valid marriage as of June 17th have been continuously present in the United States, who had entered without inspection and have been continuously present in the United States for 10 years, who don't have disqualifying crimes, so people with criminal convictions are not going to be allowed for this. They can go ahead and apply for what's called this parole in place. And if they're granted this parole in place, then they can go ahead and now apply for their green card and go through that alternate path of actually trying to get to sort of getting their papers or being able to regularize their status. We expect that there are about 500,000 people who may be eligible for this process. These are people, as I said, our statistics show that these people have been in the United States for over 23 years on average. So these are, you know, again, recognizing that we have all of these families, mixed families, who have been struggling through navigating the system. I wanted to pause and give you a little bit about our citizenship naturalization program as well. As I mentioned, sort of the culmination of everything we do, the hallmark of our agency is our naturalization process and citizenship programs. And we are right now in the middle of our favorite time of the year. It is the civic season, we call it. And it's sort of a 3-month outreach to really amplify and get the word out about the importance of civic education and citizenship to our nation. And we kick that off on June 14th. It's the Flag Day, and we host we host special naturalization ceremonies all year round. But to commemorate our civic season, we hosted a number of naturalization sort of swearing in for people who are becoming citizens at the Star-Spangled Banner Flag House, and held dozens of special ceremonies over the 4th of July holiday. I can tell you that, I mean, this fiscal year alone, we have completed about 600,000 or sworn in 600,000 new citizens. And we still obviously have a few more months to go to the end of the fiscal year. I think it was the fiscal year, 2 fiscal years before, we actually reached the 1 million mark. So we are really, really proud of the citizenship outreach, the naturalization process we do. And we provided grant programs for organizations who help people go through this process, learn the language, learn the civics test, learn the history, and be able to become citizens. And so there are a number of grant programs. We have about $10 million in grants that we give to organizations who can come forth and provide that kind of service to the community. So those are all the great stuff. I can also talk a little bit about some of the challenges we're facing. As I mentioned, even though we completed 10 million applications last year and did that with more applications that have been filed ever, we were able to reduce our backlog by 15%. We also have been able to reduce our processing times for naturalization applications to about 6 months. So it's probably one of the best times for people to be able to seek naturalization. But with that, we have a backlog of over 1.2 million asylum applications. And that is something that we are grappling with. We've been able to process employment authorizations at a very, very speedy clip. We've processed over 3.5 million of those employment authorizations. And right now, the average time is about 2 months for those, the median time for employment authorization. But you will find that there is constant competing priorities. And as you know, we oftentimes go from one challenge to the next. I can tell you that within just a few months of joining the administration in this new role, we had to deal with the Afghanistan situation, with the fall of the Afghan government and the rise of Taliban, and the largest evacuation process since Vietnam. And so all of those required us to redirect a lot of resources to that. After that, we were dealing with the Ukrainian and continue to deal with the Ukrainian war, and we stood up a program called Uniting for Ukraine. And I think what people don't appreciate sometimes about our agency, which is it's somewhat unique, is that our budget is 96% fee funded. So what does that mean? It means that most agencies, most government agencies are funded through our tax dollars. So every year there's an appropriation process, and the agency goes to Congress to ask for appropriations, to ask for their budget. But for us, we have to live off of the money that we charge for these applications. And so these services that we provide has to somehow match with the amount of money that we're charging. But by the same token, we have to be mindful that a lot of what we do is humanitarian, and a lot of the people who are coming to us don't have the resources, and so there is an obstacle of just the finances for them to be able to avail themselves of these applications. So there is a bit of a Robin Hood approach, which is to recognize that you look at people. Some of our applications are going to cost more than others. For example, some of the employment-based ones where you have employers that are in a better position to be able to finance that are going to have a higher fee than, let's say, our asylum applications, where we don't charge a fee, because an asylum applicant often, those who are seeking persecution, who are seeking protection from persecution, are themselves just trying to, to survive. So I think that kind of covers a lot of the general framework of how did DHS come to be, what are some of the, what are the agencies involved, what does USCIS do, how are we structured, what is the volume? I'm happy to pause for a minute if you have any questions here. We haven't talked about what my particular program does, the legal program. That's a little bit more nuanced and a little bit more in the weeds. I'm happy to get into that, but I often find that by this time of the talk, people are ready to engage and maybe have some questions or reactions or comments. So maybe we can take a minute and see if anybody has any questions. Or was I just so clear that you have it all down pat by now and can answer all the questions for your friends about what USCIS does and what is the immigration policies in play right now?
Wow, you're so busy. And I'm just appalled about the number of applicants and the number of people who get, the request is done. Actually, my question is, what is your role?
Sure. So my role, and I'll keep it short. My role is the title is Chief Counsel for USCIS. And what that means is that I'm responsible for the legal program that is embedded within USCIS. Our attorneys, my people, we're responsible for making sure that everything the agency does is legal. So from hiring, from employment relationships, from contracting, bringing in consultant and contracting, from procurement, from all the immigration policies, every kind of related to immigration work that we do, from the decisions and the trainings that we provide, we make sure that everything gets reviewed and is legal. So, for example, none of the individuals who are sort of processing these applications and adjudicating and making decisions, none of them have to be an attorney in order to do that. And that's because my program is responsible for identifying what the appropriate law is, being able to translate it into training for people and help them take that law and be able to apply it to the particular application in order to reach a decision. And interesting part about my role is that the legal program within DHS, so every agency has its own separate in-house embedded legal program. Not all of the legal programs are independent from the agency. So while technically my attorneys and my support staff, their paycheck is paid for by the agency, so the fees that are generated, they're the ones that are paying for our attorneys, and the agency sort of determines how many people we get to have. At the end of the day, the agency and the director is not my boss. I'm independent from the director, I'm independent from the agency, because the concept is when DHS was born, the concept was to make sure that the legal program is not under the influence of the agency, so that the legal program can make sure that the integrity of the agency, that everything that it does is legal. So my boss is the general counsel for all of DHS, which is a Senate confirmed political appointee, whereas mine is not a Senate confirmed, but I'm a political appointee during this administration. And we can go a little bit into that too, because I know people have some confused, they're a little bit confused about, well, what does it mean to be a political appointee in this position versus sort of, because I have colleagues, for example, for FEMA, for TSA, those chief counsels, the head of those legal departments, they are career employees. Whereas my position or the ICE, for ICE's chief counsel, her position is a political appointee, but CBP's isn't. So I can imagine people are confused. What does that mean in terms of sort of continuity or even your role? But we can get into that in a little bit too.
I know how to thank you. I know you're very busy, and
Oh, no, thank you.
you are too young to work for the immigration for 25 years. Did you start when you were 10 years old?
That's what I keep saying, but nobody believes me anymore.
You really honored us. Thank you very much.